Hi, moms. My name's Hillary, and I am a therapist, and I want to tell you a story today about a client of mine. The story is real, but the names are not. Now, before I get started, I want to let you know that sometimes when we talk about something that's painful, like shame, which I'm going to be talking about, some stuff can come up for us. We can feel like the places in our life where we experience shame come to the surface. So if you notice that happening, be gentle with yourself. That might be a good thing to think about asking for prayer about, and think of that as being the way that the Spirit is saying, hey, I want to do a little bit of work here. So I want to introduce you to Belle. Belle comes into my office, and she slinks down on the couch. She's silent for a few moments, and her eyes look towards the floor. She has two young kids, a daughter in preschool and a son who's 6 months old in the carrier that she brought to session with her today. When she starts talking, she says that she's been yelling at her preschooler this week, and she feels horrible about it. I ask her what's coming up for her, and she has a hard time making eye contact with me, and she says that she's feeling shame. After waiting for a few moments, she tells me more. She says that she feels embarrassed about her body, about the state of her home. She feels like, even though she loves her kids, she feels like when she meets other moms who have a career, she's just a mom. And when I ask her to tell her how that's impacting me, she says she doesn't want to invite her friends over. She feels embarrassed to have sex with her partner. And she doesn't want to tell the truth about who she is to anyone, but even to herself, because she has this fear. What if I am actually a bad mom? What if the thing that I'm afraid is true about me is actually true about me? So as a therapist, I stay with her in those moments. I'm still. I look into her eyes, and I see that she's still not looking back at me. So I say, Belle, can you look back at me for a moment? Can you meet my gaze? And she says that she finds it hard. She doesn't really want to open her eyes. With her eyes shut tight, sitting on the couch, she says that even as she's talking about the shame, she feels extremely vulnerable, like she knows better. She knows Jesus. Why is she feeling all of the things that she's feeling? Again, she feels shame about the shame. So I ask her again, I said, Belle, can you look at me? Can you meet my gaze? And can you tell me what you see coming back on my face? And tentatively and slowly, she opens her eyes like she's afraid of what she'll find. And I ask her to stay with me, and she says, almost confused, you're not judging me. You're warm. I feel empathy and love from you. As we talk about her response to this, she talks about how she knows where the shame comes from. She grew up in a house where there was a lot of criticism, and it's almost like it became part of her inner dialogue. And she knows, because of the work that we've done, that she actually participates in fueling the shame. That when the shame comes up, she pulls away from the people who tell her the truth about herself and remind her that she is good and loved and not alone. Her baby is fussing, and she feeds him as the session wraps up. And after feeding him, he spits up on her and himself. And so with exasperation, she laughs and kind of wipes it off and packs up her things. And as she's leaving my office, she says to me, thank you for loving me and seeing me. Even though I'm a mess, I feel safe with you. And I feel like when I'm with you, it helps me not judge myself or shame myself so much. Here's where it gets interesting. Belle leaves my office and walks out through the waiting room past Joanna. Joanna, my next appointment, is a mother of 3. I come out to meet her. She comes back to my office. She sits down and starts to weep softly. And I ask her what's going on, and she says it's been a really hard week. And it was only made worse by the fact that she saw the mom who just came out of my office, who looks like she has it all together with the baby in tow. Yeah. You might see a little bit of yourself in this story, but Joanna is sitting there crying, saying, unlike that woman, she is not enough. So as a therapist to women in all of life's phases and stages, I have this really interesting insight into the inner lives of women. What I hear come up over and over and over again is how women feel not enough, how moms feel like they just don't have it together. There is a shame theme running through the work that I do with moms. And there's this idea that unlike everybody else, compared to the women I know, compared to the women in my MOPS group, compared to the women that I see on Instagram and social media, I'm not enough. Unlike everybody else, I'm not good enough because I couldn't breastfeed, because I had to use formula, because my jeans don't fit, because I couldn't make the cookies, I had to buy the cookies. Right? All the things that moms shame themselves about, fill in the blank. So shame is this thing that rises up when we feel not good enough, not loved, somehow broken, unlovable, unworthy. And let me be clear, shame is not guilt. Guilt is actually a really healthy emotion that comes up when we feel like we've done something wrong that violates our value system. But shame is the story that we are bad. And there are two kinds of shame. There's a shame that comes up in the moment, and we call that state shame. But then there's this other kind of shame, shame that simmers in the background of our story of our life, and we call that trait shame. It's almost like it's part of our identity, like we can't remember a time without it. But regardless of how long you've experienced shame, let me tell you something. We are never born with it. It's something that we learn. In the field of psychology and affective neuroscience, we think of shame as the master emotion. It has this ability to come up and take over, almost like there is an internal abuser within us. Shame, although sometimes people think of emotions as just being in your head, I certainly heard that story before I started looking into and researching and becoming an expert in the field of neuroscience. But shame actually triggers a profound neurochemical response in our body, an activation of a certain branch of our nervous system, which actually causes physical distress in our body. It actually pulls our body down. It makes it really hard for us to keep eyes on somebody else. Makes us feel small. And there's a reason for that. If I was to rewind my talk and you were to hear it from the beginning, you'd hear a theme woven through the stories that I told about shame, and that's relationship. You can hear relationship is central to how Belle feels about herself, and also how she starts to begin to see herself differently. More than ever, science is proving to us that the survival parts of our brain depend on relationship to help us know who we are in the world. So when it is reflected back to us that we are not enough or that we are unlovable, it actually creates this neurophysiological response that is meant to be unforgettable. And that's why shame works in the short term for behavior control with kids, because it feels so yucky that we'll do anything we can to not feel that again, including trying to change our behavior. So shame is often experienced in our primary relationships, what the people closest to us think about us. But shame can also come from societies and systems and communities. It can affect how we feel about ourselves if we see around us the erasure of people groups, marginalization and the reduction of women of color and indigenous people, people who are differently abled or don't fit within the social mold of what is ideal. So shame can come from a disapproving look from a parent, but it can also come from a disapproving look of a country or a community. And when resolved in a moment, shame can erode our sense of worth in the world. When it's unresolved, it can create suffering, physical illness, mental illness, and pulls us further away from the very thing that we need to actually heal the shame, which is connection. And there's that relationship thread again. Connection is the currency for healing, but it means risking and moving towards someone. And if we experience shame, we're often afraid that if we move towards someone with our shame, that we're going to have more shame or more judgment. But shame comes up because of a rupture of connection. But we can heal that shame through connection. Because shame is learned, it can also be unlearned. In preparing to be with you today, I had a long conversation with my pastor about shame, and we were talking about some of the conversations that come up in faith communities around shame. And in the Genesis story, in the poem where Adam and Eve eat from the fruit, and there is shame after, there's this ongoing argument that shame was actually the healthy response to sin. But when we actually looked into the original text, we saw that shame wasn't the best and most ideal punishment for sin. It was actually an effect of being disconnected from perfect union of God, that there was this kind of turning in on ourselves in a way that actually made us not want to go towards love, but go away from it. Shame makes us want to pull away from the thing that actually could help us heal. Makes us want to pull away from the very source of love itself. It's not the healthiest response to our woundedness. It is actually a part of our woundedness. So here are two things that I want you to know as moms about shame. You are not alone. Whatever you think is so bad that it makes you unlovable, the particulars might be different for the woman sitting next to you, but all of us in this room know what it's like to feel like we're broken or unlovable. So whatever shame tells you about how you're the only one, the story is a lie, and it keeps you even more stuck. We need empathy, we need connection, we need the experience of being seen. We need each other as women. And sometimes having another person tell us about their shame is the thing that reminds us that we are not alone. So if you have a little bit of courage to say to someone today, I feel like this is something that's been painful for me, you don't know what you are giving her permission to acknowledge within herself. The second thing is that as mothers, when you do not deal with your own shame, particularly how you were shamed growing up, you'll pass it on to your kids. Moving towards shame and exploring it to understand it and become free from it is terrifying. But by doing that, you can break the cycle. We don't need to give the next generation of people a story that they too can't connect with the source of love, with God. In the end, I want to say to you what shame never will. There is a truth about you that is more true than how the shame makes you feel, and that is that you are loved. The banner over you is love. And I don't say that on my authority. I don't say that as someone who represents the neuroscience or the psychology field. I say that as someone who knows the Most High, that our Creator has called us good. And that's the power of the gospel, is that even though God knows about our woundedness and our tendency to turn away, God said, I will not let anything, including how you feel about yourself, stand in the way of how I feel about you and you knowing that you are loved by me. The work of unlearning shame is finding people and communities who can mirror that back to us, can mirror the heart of the Father back to us, so we can know our value as children of God. And then finding the courage to believe that that is more true about us than whatever the shame says. Thank you.